Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, 7 years had passed since they last saw each other, 7 years of silence, unanswered questions, and secrets. Buried deep, she had built a life far away from him, guarding the truth with all her strength. But one unexpected meeting in the hospital changed everything. In that single moment, the walls she had built began to crumble, and the past they both tried to forget came rushing back. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. She had been standing by the window for hours, watching the rain slide down the glass like silver threads. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had changed, but inside her heart, everything felt different. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, over and over, as if somehow she could change it just by thinking hard enough that it had all started that morning. She woke up with a heaviness in her chest, a strange feeling she couldn't shake. The air felt colder, the silence thicker, and even her own home felt unfamiliar. Something inside told her that today would not be like any other day. Then the phone rang. His name lit up the screen, the name she once loved to see, the name that used to bring her joy. But this time, her hands trembled as she answered. His voice was sharp, urgent. There were no greetings, no warm words, only a command that struck her like a knife. He told her what he wanted, his words cold and final. She tried to speak, to reason with him, but he didn't listen. He never did. His tone left no space for questions, no room for her feelings. She hung up the phone and stood there, her heart pounding, her breath shallow. She felt trapped, caught between his demands and the fragile hope still burning in her chest. The rest of the day blurred into fragments, her restless pacing, her silent tears, the sound of her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. She marked the date on the calendar with a trembling hand, knowing it was the day her life would change forever. But life has a way of surprising even the most broken hearts. When he showed up later, his face pale and his eyes heavy with regret, she thought for a moment that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. But by then, it was too late. She was already walking out the door, her choice made, the decision final. She remembered talking to herself out loud as if to trick the solitude. Hang in there, my loves. Just a little longer. Mummy's going to make it. The headlights appeared suddenly, a pair of blinding eyes coming from the wrong direction, as if fate had decided to endeavorate it. Ara had no time to think. The impact was a deafening explosion, a silent flash that hurled her against the seatbelt and shook her entire body with the violent force of crushing metal. Afterward came thizolence, a silence that seemed to swallow the world whole. When she opened her eyes, water was streaming down her face. Rain or blood, she didn't know. The smell of fuel and wet earth filled her lungs, and only then did the distant sirens, indistinct voices, and the ragged catch of her own breath. She tried to move and felt her right arm burn with excruciating pain, before fear could completely overwhelm her. Another contraction tore through her, wrenching a scream from her lips. Life, stubborn and defiant, announced itself even in the midst of chaos. Waking up in the small and illusioned town hospital was like emerging from a murky nightmare. The white ceiling had damp stains, and the hum of the fan seemed to mock her fragility. Her arm was in a cast. Her face throbbed with a deep pain that seemed to merge skin and soul. A weary-faced nurse entered, adjusted her for, and said softly, "You're safe now, but you have to be strong." The phrase etched itself into her memory because shortly after came the surgeries. Ara saw her reflection for the first time days later in a small mirror brought by an orderly. Her cheekbones seemed more pronounced, her nose subtly different, and 2 fine scars discreetly crossed her skin near her left eyebrow and chin. It wasn't just her face that had changed. The gaze that met hers from the mirror was not that of the young woman who had dreamed in Silverwood City. It was the look of someone who had known loss intimately and who would never again trust any promise. The delivery occurred in the same hospital under cold lights and stifled screams. The first cry was weak, but it brought a threat of hope. Valerie was tiny, Sasmel, she seemed made of glass. The second baby, however, was born in Ara remembered the sensation of absolute emptiness when the doctor sadly shook his head, and the strength she had to summon to keep from collapsing because one of her children needed her alive, whole, resilient. In that suffocating room between the distant sound of rain and the harsh smell of cheap disinfectant, Ara made a silent vow. She would bear not only the love that had destroyed her, but also the life that had almost killed her. There would be no more Silverwood City. No more Ethan, no more the naive girl who believed in whispered promises in alleyways. The accident had been a definitive end, and at the same time, a forced reset. The following months were in Arnell exile. Alone with Valerie, she learned a heavy weight of constant fear. The little girl had a delicate heart. Every fever seemed like a death sentence. Every medical appointment a battle against the panic of losing what remained of her soul. Ara changed cities whenever she felt overly curious. She created a quiet routine where every step was calculated, not to draw attention, and every smile was measured as if the world could perceive a secret. In time, the physical pain subsided, but the trauma remained etched into every fiber of her. Being, driving at night, smelling fuel, or hearing heavy rain were triggers that made her relive the accident. Still, she never gave in to weakness. The rebirth that the accident imposed on her transformed her into a woman of stone on the outside and glass on the inside. She promised herself that no one from that old life would ever find her again. That Valerie would grow up far from any shadow of the past, but fate, cruel and patient, waited 7 years to collect its debt. All it took was Archild's innocent smile and an overly bright consulting room for all their meticulously built walls to begin to crack. Can a traumatic past ever truly be left behind, or does it always find a way to resurface? Comment your thoughts below. Don't miss climax of this gripping story. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell. Valerie's captivating smile was a spark that ignited a desert Ethan didn't even know he carried within him. At first he tried to convince himself it was just sympathy and natural tenderness for a fragile, charming child. But with each tiny hand that gripped his finger with absolute trust, something within him shifted. His heart, once armored by routine and silence, began to beat with a forgotten rhythm. The white consulting room had become an unexpected refuge. Valerie always entered with boundless curiosity, as if the world was a safe place as long as he was there. She touched the instruments, smelled the antiseptic vials, and breathed the air with an innocence that dismantled Ahai's defenses. Ethan found himself smiling without realizing it, chuckling at her small gestures, inventing childlike explanations for complex medical devices that, in reality, carried serious diagnosis. Ara, however, remained a wall of caution. Each time their gazes met, he perceived the tension hidden beneath her practiced serenity. That rainy afternoon, when Valerie, with the cruel naturalness of children, innocently remarked that he looked like her daddy, the world stopped for a second. Ethan felt a sharp pang in his chest, a mixture of unexpected joy and burning pain. He searched Ara's face for any sign, but only found her quick deflection and a slight grimace of effort. She seemed to be fighting something ancient, a fear he didn't understand, but that weighed in the air like an impending storm. The rest of the consultation passed in silence. He listened to Valerie's tiny heart with an almost reverent care, feeling each beat as if it awakened a dormant memory. The stethoscope seemed to vibrate not only with the child's life, but with an invisible bond he couldn't explain. When the rain intensified and the sky turned a deep, bruised gray, Ethan offered Todrivam. It wasn't just courtesy. It was a desperate need to prolong that moment, not to let them disappear into the world before he understood what was stirring within himself. Ara hesitated, glanced at the storm outside, and finally gave a slight nod. The car became a capsule of memories and possibilities. The sound of rain on the windshield was hypnotic, and Ara's subtle perfume, that sweet scent that seemed to emanate from a past he couldn't recall ever living, filled the space like a potent spell. Valerie chattered about trivial things, pointing out the city lights with childish charm, but the adults were trapped in a dense silence. When they arrived at her modest building, Ara thanked him in a hushed voice. Ethan, however, couldn't contain himself. Before she could open the car door, he gently clutched her arm like one who fears a sudden movement might shatter something too fragile. Their eyes met, and for an instant, 7 years vanished. Everything that had remained suspended in time, the alleyways of Silverwood City, the small caves, the whispered promises, and the splinter of betrayal, returned in assaillant crashing wave. The kiss came like lightning, urgent, yathasitant, laden with what had been lost and what could have been. Ara's mouth tasted of salt, perhaps from the rain, perhaps from tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed. But before Ethan could fully immerse himself in that resurrected past, she pulled back, gasping, her eyes filled with wet fear. I can't, she whispered almost voicelessly, and scrambled out of the car, disappearing through the building door without a backward glance. Ethan remained there, standing in the pouring rain, his heart burning as if it had only returned to life to suffer again. Every drop that slid down his face, mixed with the crushing sensation of loss and desperate longing, He knew with a clarity that pierced him that smiling child had awakened an instinct he never knew he possessed. The instinct to protect, to care for, to be something more than a distant spectator in his own life. In the following days, Ethan alternated between professional silence and the gnawing restlessness that consumed him from within. Every time he saw Valerie in the consulting room, that paternal instinct roared louder. The way she looked at him, trusting him unreservedly, smiling with that exact dimple he recognized in himself. None of it could be coincidence. Ara, for her part, spent sleepless nights. The kiss still burned on her lips, but the dread was stronger than the nostalgia that had never truly died. The past she had sworn to bury was now banging on her door, and worse, it held power to destroy the fragile fortress she had built for herself and her daughter. Every beat of Valeria's tiny heart was a stark reminder that taking a risk could cost her everything. And yet, fate seemed to mock the promises she had made to herself, because after that kiss, Ethan would no longer be just a doctor. And for him, Valerie would no longer be just a patient. Something deep and irreversible had begun to stir, an instinct that would no longer allow him to remain on the sidelines of his own story. What do you think will be the most difficult truth for Era to reveal to Ethan, and how will he react? Share your predictions in the comments. Don't miss the stunning conclusion. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. The wind that night seemed to carry ancient whispers, and every step Ethan took on the wet pavement sounded like a judgment. Ever since the unsettling reunion with his old residency colleagues, a profound crack had opened within him. Their mocking laughter at the mention of Ara, their cruel insinuations about the disappearance, and the malice disguised as nostalgia resonated in his head like a relentless torture. Vanish it off the map. She probably found a way to leave with the shame. They said she had a tumor, but who knows if it wasn't something else. She was pretty, sure, but poor. People like that just disappear or become a sad memory. Each phrase was a fresh stab. Ethan could barely respond, only feeling his stomach on, while the wine glass in his hand seemed to weigh a ton. When he overheard rumor that she might have died, his heart inexplicably constricted. And in that instant, he understood. No matter how much he tried to shield himself, Ara had never been just a memory. She was the wound that never healed. That early morning upon arriving home, he sat in the dark living room with the rain drumming against the windows and sought answers. The first doubt nodded at him. The tumor, her vaguely recalled old conversations, the flimsy excuses, her sudden disappearance. He delved into hospital records, discreetly spoke with medical colleagues, made calls that cost him a piece of his pride, and the truth arrived like a dry, brutal blow to Thetis. Ara had never had the tumor they spoke of. That entire story had merely been a convenient shadow to justify her disappearance. Then only one plausible explanation remained. The next night, unable to control the overwhelming pulpus, he drove to the modest neighborhood where she now lived. He parked his car at a distance on an almost deserted street and simply watched. The light from her living room cast comforting shadows. Through the window he glimpsed the scene that would change everything. Valerie sitting on the carpet, giggling as she flipped through an old photo album. Ethan's shirt beat wildly erratically. Even from that distance, the small dimple that appeared on the little girl's face when she smiled was agonizingly familiar. And when the child pointed to a photo of a young, laughing in a way he remembered as if it were yesterday, something deep within him shattered. It was no longer doubt. It was a primal instinct, a certainty that surged from the depths of his soul. The next day, his decision was automatic. Heck would no longer pretend he didn't see the signs, that he didn't feel that undeniable pull. When he knocked on the door of the small apartment, his heart pounded like it did in a critical surgery room. But there was no scalpel that could save him from what he was about to hear. Era opened the door, her face tense as if she already anticipated the storm. Ethan's gaze pierced through her, searching for something that would confirm or deny the suspicion consuming him. He took a deep breath, feeling the words burn in his throat. Ara, who is Valerie's father. The silence that followed was suffocating. She froze, her eyes wide for an instant before she regained a fragile mask of control. A second of hesitation that forthon sounded like a silent confession, but then the lie came, dry and almost convincing. Her father passed away before she was born. He stood motionless, feeling things were echo like a blunt blade. He wanted to believe. He wanted to cling to words, passed away, and let that be it, final point. But something within him rode in denial. The internal storm, the one that had been brewing since the first time Valerie had instinctively held his finger in the consulting room, was now complete. Ethan's eyes searched hers, desperate to find any crack of truth. But Ara held lie with a desperate strength. And he understood it wasn't just fear, it was protection. An invisible shield she had raised against the past, against him, against anything that could threaten the small fortress she had meticulously built for herself and her daughter. I understand, he said, his voice almost unrecognizable. But he didn't understand, he didn't accept it. His distrust burned, transforming into a silent obsession. When he left the apartment, the sky was beginning to darken again, announcing another storm. The cold wind cut through his skin, but what truly chilled him was the mix of rage and profound pain. Rage for having been cut off from a story that was perhaps his. Pain for feeling that something precious had slipped through his fingers, unable to prevent it. In the following days, Ethan alternated between professional silence and the consuming restlessness within him. Every time he saw Valerie in the consulting room, the paternal instinct screamed louder. The way she looked at him, trusting him unreservedly, smiling with that feature he recognized in himself. None of it could be coincidence. Ara, for her part, felt the emotional net closing in. The kiss she tried Tobury with denial returned in her dreams, and the lie she uttered at the doorway like an anchor in her chest. She knew Ethan hadn't fully believed her. She knew that at any moment the past she tried to bury could erupt with full force. In each subsequent meeting, the dialogues between them became more loaded with tension, though cloaked in formality. Simple words like, "How is she?" or "Theatists are ready," came impregnated with everything that couldn't be said. It was like walking on glass, each step more dangerous than the last. Inside, Ethan felt he was on the verge of discovering everything, and desperate, knew shouldn't have much time left before all the walls she had built with so much sacrifice came crashing down, and that was how the near discovery planted its seed. Silent but relentless. The storm was no longer in the sky. It lived inside them, ready to destroy everything that was a lie. What choice do you think we'll make now that the truth is so close to being revealed? Will she continue to hide or finally confess? Share your thoughts below. Don't miss a beat of this incredible story. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more emotional narratives. The storm, now internal, found its devastating expression in Valerie's fragile body. On a suffocating afternoon, as Sarah washed the small dinner plates, a muffled thud resonated from the living room. The plate slipped from her fingers as she saw her daughter collapsed on the carpet, her face pale, her lips tinged with an almost imperceptible blue. Ara's heart exploded in a silent aspiration as she rushed to the child, feeling the crushing weight of all the years of silence pressed down on her chest. "Valerie," she cried, her voice broken by a fear she had never known. "Sweetheart, look at me, please." The world around her dissolved into blurry patches of furniture, walls, and distant memories. Only the frantic pounding of her heart existed, and the small body that seemed to vanish in her arms. When she arrived at the hospital, the stark white corridors seemed like an extension of her own panic. Nurses rushed past, voices overlapping in a symphony of urgency. But all felt was the terrifying void of what if I lost. Ethan appeared out of nowhere, and for an instant she felt a strange mix of relief and crushing guilt. He asked no questions. He simply looked at the children's instinct took over. "Emergency room now," he ordered, his voice firm, cutting through the chaos. The small body disappeared on the gurney and he vanished behind the double doors, wearing the authority of one who carries not only medical responsibility but also a pain he still dared not admit. Eros left in the waiting room hugging herself, utterly unable to control her trembling. 7 years of silence, 7 years of lies, 7 years of trying to bury the past, and no fate was collecting its entire debt at once. Every passing second was a needle piercing her chest. Meanwhile, in the operating room, Ethan felt his hands had never been so heavy and yet so precise at the same time. That child's heart monitor emitted fragile signals, and each beat seemed like a desperate plea for help. He forced himself into the clinical calm he had learned over the years. But inside, the paternal instinct roared like a cornered animal. "Not now. Not while I'm here. I'm not going to let you go." He remembered Valerie's smile holding the stethoscope like a toy, the dimple that appeared when she giggled, the way her curious eyes seemed to recognize him without words. Every memory was both fuel and torture, reminding him of what he had lost, and what he could lose forever. Outside, Ara prayed without faith, pleading in whispers that only the void could hear. She thought of all the times she almost told the truth, of all the gazes she avoided, of all the words she never uttered. If anything happened to her daughter, none of it would matter anymore. Not the fear, not the shame, not the obsessive protection that had led her to build that life of lies. The horrors stretched into what felt like days. Every time a doctor rushed past in Thekkerida, Ara's heart leaped and faltered, bracing for the worst, until finally Ethan appeared. His face was marked by exhaustion, his lab coat stained, but his eyes held an intensity that Lara would never forget. "She's going to be okay," he said, and the immense weight of those words almost made her collapse. "But we need to talk, Ara, not later." Now the waiting room seemed to shrink. Ara felt the walls closing in, the floor disappearing beneath her feet. It was as if the entire world was about to hear the truth she had guarded with fire and iron for 7 years. Ethan's voice was low but cutting. "I need to know. I saved your daughter, but I need to know if she's also my daughter." The silence that followed was made of all the screams she had stifled, of all the nights she cried alone, of all the fear that had haunted her since she decided to disappear. Ara's heart pounded as if it wanted to escape her chest. Outside the city continued indifferently, but inside her world was about to crumble, and for the first time Ara felt there was no longer any way to run from the past, nor from the man who, even without knowing it, had always been present in every beat of her daughter's heart. This is the moment of truth. What do you think will finally reveal to Ethan? And how will this revelation change their lives forever? Share your boldest predictions in the comments section. If this story is touching your heart, don't let it end here. Give us a like to show you believe in endings that warm the soul. Comment below. What was the moment that mothered you most on this journey of love and reunion? Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new stories that will make you laugh, cry, and fall in love all over again. Share it with those you love. Spread this emotion, and warm other hearts too, because stories like these truly come alive when they are felt and shared. The hospital corridor seemed to have swallowed all the sounds of the world. Only the distant echo of manitas and the soft rustle of scrubs on the waxed floor remained, a reminder that life went on around them, indifferent to the abyss in which Ethan found themselves. She knelt, no longer feeling her legs. Her chest rose and fell in ragged gasps, a knot suffocating her throat. There were no words sufficient to explain 7 years of silence, 7 years of fear, 7 years of hidden love. Ethan, his hands still, trembling from exertion of surgery, looked at the woman he knew intimately, not by her body, but by the gaze that had always told him silent stories. His world already fractured now, shattered into shards of pain and longing, of loss and rediscovery. Our daughter Hema murmured almost to himself, as if needing to prove that such a phrase could exist outside the dreams he never admitted to having. All tried to rise, but the weight of guilt dragged her back to the floor. Hot, salty tears burned her face. She grasped his hands tightly, almost in a plea for judgment or absolution. "I tried to protect you." Her voice was a raw, broken whisper. "When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I knew your family would never accept a woman like him. I was just a lost resident with no one on my side, and you were of everything. I couldn't risk losing my daughter." The silence between them was alive, pulsating, an electric field on the verge of exploding. Ethan closed his eyes for an instant, and memories surged like sharp blades. The residency corridors, the furtive glances, the hushed laughter, the stolen kiss on a rainy night that changed everything without either of them realizing. "You should have trusted me," he finally said, his voice a mix of contained rage and searing pain. 7 years, Ara. 7 years without knowing I had a daughter." She squeezed his hands even tighter, almost pleading. "I know, no, I was wrong. But when I lost him," her breath hitched and the words shone suspended. "I had twins, Ethan, a boy and a girl. He didn't survive, and I couldn't bear the thought of bringing you that grief. I buried myself along with him." Their revelation fell like a thunderclap. Ethan's chest tightened. The image of Asen he never knew pierced his heart like an invisible arrow. It was both pain and belated grief, but also profound understanding. The woman kneeling before him wasn't just guilty, she was a survivor of a silent tragedy. He knelt before her, ignoring the cold hospital floor. His large hands cradled her small, trembling face, forcing her to look into his eyes. "I should hate you now," he said with a raw sincerity that weighted the air. "But all I feel is that I lost you twice, and I'm not going to let that happen again." Her tears fell onto his hands, which then drew her into an embrace that seemed to want to stitch 7 years of rupture together in seconds. It was a desperate, messy hug, where pain and love met, intertwined. She felt her body finally yield, as if this were the first time in years, truly In the next room, Valerie slowly began to open her eyes. The morning light filtered through the blinds and the steady beat of the monitor was almost a lullaby. The little girl blinked, confused, but seeing the familiar faces in the distance, her Mother and the Dr. Wano had a different light in his eyes. A sleepy smile spread across her lips. "Mummy," she called, her voice weak but full of hope. Ara rushed to her, kissing her forehead, her hair, her small hands. Ethan followed, and for the first time, he touched his daughter with the full, undeniable knowledge that she was his. The contact was hesitant, almost fervent, but laden with a silent promise. He would never again let her be in danger alone. When Valerie fell asleep again, exhausted, the two of them remained there, side by side, watching the child's chest rise and fall in a tranquil rhythm. Between them, there were no more masks, only the shared grief for the lost son, and the undeniable love for what remained. Ethan broke the silence with a whisper laden with fierce determination. "I never stopped loving you, Era, never. And now neither you nor our daughter are ever leaving my life, no matter what." She closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to believe. 7 years of fear melted away in that instant, replaced by that, though fragile and scarred, held the strength of a new beginning. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers, and knew thought from then on, nothing would ever be the same. The triple hug came hours later when Valerie woke up smiling, and between them, innocent of the storm they had weathered, tears flowed silently, but they were not just of pain, they were tears of immense relief, of a profound promise, of a love that had survived lies, distance, and devastating loss. The hospital, with its antiseptic smells and cold lights, bore witness to a silent pact. It wouldn't be easy. Theskers wouldn't disappear. But for the very first time, there was the tangible possibility of rebuilding. Together, the afternoon sun painted the park in golden hues, as if the entire world had decided to celebrate that beautiful Sunday. A light breeze swayed the trees and carried the scent of freshly cut grass, mingled with the distant aroma of popcorn and cotton candy. Ara walked slowly beside Ethan, hand in hand, as she watched Valerie run freely across the lawn, her loose hair fluttering behind her, her laughter echoing like pure music. She held a vibrant red balloon, and the braided strings seemed almost alive. Between her tiny fingers, with each step, the balloon rose and fell, playfully dancing with the wind, as if it were an extension of the child herself. Lara felt a pang in her chest, a mix of pure overflowing happiness and a relief so profound, it almost hurt. After so many years of fear, of hiding, of heavy secrets, she could simply exist. She could simply exist. She could see them like this, side by side, laughing without the world judging or snatching away what was hers. "Look at her," Ethan murmured, his voice low and laden with raw emotion. "It's like the whole sky fits into that smile." Ara took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers. "I'm still scared, you know," she confessed, her voice trembling with sincerity. "Scared that all of this, is just a dream." Ethan stopped walking and gently pulled her closer. His eyes, moist and firm, met hers like an anchor grounding her. "Then I promise you," he said, his voice unwavering, "if it's a dream, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it last." He kissed her forehead, and that simple gesture seemed to strip away the last remnants of pain she still carried within. Valerie came running back, breathless, her cheeks flushed with exertion. "Mummy, Daddy, look." She held up the balloon that had almost slipped from her grasp. It almost flew away, but I caught it. Both adults knelt down at the same time, and enveloped her daughter in a tight hug while Ethan covered her with kisses. A triple hug, tight, warm, full of silent promises. For an instant, nothing else existed, only the warmth of their hands, the sweet scent of childhood, the profound feeling that at long last they were truly complete. They sat down on the grass, and Valerie rested her head in Ara's lap, her eyes shibby from so much play. Ethan watched every detail, the way Thedonpause appeared in his daughter's smile, an echo of the woman he had never stopped loving, the way the wind playfully tousled hair that no longer needed to hide from anyone. However, the red balloon suddenly slipped free, drifting upward slowly, gracefully. Valerie tried to reach for it, but then giggled as she watched it float to her grasp. "It's free now," she exclaimed, clapping her tiny hands. Era and Ethan looked at each other. There was something profoundly symbolic in that balloon disappearing into Veski, as if all the fears and sorrows that had bound them for so many years were also finally leaving, floating far away. "Just like us," Ethan murmured, pulling Ara closer for a soft kiss, while Valerie giggled, charmed by the scene. The sun began to set, and the three of them walked hand in hand towards home. Valerie, nestled between them, swung her arms back and forth, quietly singing a mad-up song. Ara felt a peace she had never known. It no longer mattered what had been left behind. The judgments, the loneliness, the nights of hidden tears, everything had been worth it to reach this moment. As they passed through the park gate, Ethan squeezed her hand and said, "I promise you we're never going to get lost again," and Ara believed him. For the first time in a very long time, she truly believed him. As night slowly fell and the city lights began to twinkle, they disappeared down the quiet street, forming the image of a family who, after so much suffering, had finally found their way home together. If this story touched your heart, don't let it in here. Give it a like to show that you too believe in endings that warm the soul. Comment below what was the moment that moved you most on this journey of love and reunion. Subscribe so you don't miss any new stories that will make YOLO cry and fall in love all over again. Share it with those you love. Spread this emotion and warm other hearts too. Because stories like these truly come alive when they are felt and shared.